it's been entirely concentrated, all of that power, within those Bab al-Assizia barracks, and there is really nothing else. So it's a vacuum.
And I suppose that the loyalists to Gaddafi could potentially now see foreign journalists as quite powerful currency. Could they? I mean, we heard how they were holed up in it.
I mean, what you have probably is individuals with guns, some who may be taking, seeing it as an opportunity, others who have been bombed by NATO forces, and for whatever reason, perhaps feel they want to move against citizens of that country, maybe the press. You really can't read too much into it, except that this is a country full of people who are in the throes of immense change. There is a lot of weaponry, and most of them are still very used to being watchful, suspicious, and unsure as to who will actually be able to impose some order.
Do you think the dangers are getting greater for journalists covering conflicts?
I don't think they're particularly greater in terms of the actual conflict when you look at the numbers killed in the Second World War, even as relative to the scale of that war. What some people sometimes wrongly assume is that journalists are in a bubble and are somehow protected by being journalists, particularly if they're foreigners operating in another country. That is just not so.
But it used to be respected, didn't it?
No, it didn't.
It's an absolute
myth. I don't know where that's come from. There is absolutely no evidence for saying that whatsoever. Journalists were always seen as foreigners, incomers, people who often didn't speak the language, which gives them another difficulty, which is particularly the case in an Arab-speaking country with European journalists. There's never been a golden age where journalists were, as it were, welcomed with a red carpet. They've always had to take their chance. And one of the things that has exacerbated things, and this is the very business of 24-hour news, which takes journalists now, both print and photographers and radio and television, into areas where there is no downtime. You have no time to go into a place and then withdraw to file your copy. In other words, leave the front line or where the action is, because part of your work. Now people are there in the middle of it, so that's added to it. And the second thing is there's the complication of the fact that nearly all countries who are operating in have their own television, so they have a view of what journalists maybe get up to. Now in Libya, journalism was actually illegal. I used to be informed as a journalist, you're not allowed to do this, but go ahead. It was technically illegal for a journalist to operate as a foreigner. Their own journalism was a joke, and a bad one. It was all propaganda, and most Libyans grew to dislike the idea of journalism. It gave them rubbish, nonsense, lies, and they weren't sure who to believe. So journalists don't have that high a regard given to them by local people, and for very good reasons.
So you mentioned your experience as a reporter in Libya. I think you reported there for 30 years on and off, is that right?
Yes.
And you met, it's very impressive, and you met Gaddafi from time to time.
Everybody did. He always held press conferences, usually in the middle of the night. 4 a.m. was not unusual. Sometimes at the barracks, sometimes in the middle of the desert. You just used to hang around for hours and hours waiting for him. He was ostentatious, he was vain, he turned up in all sorts of different costumes, and everything from a Bedouin shepherd to an admiral of the fleet. The whole thing was part of this image for Libya, and he is obsessive as being sort of embodying the spirit of the country, which makes one wonder now as to the speculation that he might leave. From everything that, over the years, that we've all observed, I mean, Libya is everything to him. He was not very interested in foreign countries. He occasionally inflicted himself on a number, such as African countries with his entourage, to the annoyance of the hosts. He went once to the United States, once to England. He wasn't really interested in the rest of the world, nor was he very educated about it.
And when did things turn for him in Libya in terms of the support of the people? Because, you know, when he came in as this revolutionary, a lot of support.
Hard to tell, because in a way, when you have a dictatorship in which people live in fear of him, you could go to little cafes, you could meet, as I have over the years, people you really trusted and who were very honest, but even they, in private or standing in the middle of the desert, didn't actually vouchsafe to you their real feelings. They indicated that, you know, of course they wanted change. They would like to see him dead. Nobody voiced those thoughts. I once said, even on a question of foreign affairs, to one of his very senior advisors, I said, why on earth have you gone along with this crackpot idea that he's peddling at the moment? Why didn't you say? And he stopped me and he said, say? He said, I want to live. And he meant it. That is the kind of regime where it's very difficult to read at what point the general public perhaps got itself, ordinary citizens, the sense that yes, there had to be change and they'd possibly be part of it. But most people for so many years were just too frightened to ever think or at least voice those sentiments. And of course it happened in Benghazi, which was somewhat just beyond where his writ ran, and that's where it was always thought it would begin.
What were you aware of when you were reporting of what was going on, potentially the human rights abuses?
Extremely difficult to tell. You heard whispers, you heard rumours. Every so often you could just catch something happening. I remember years and years ago the Italian ambassador telling me the horrifying information that their embassy had complained about the screaming and yelling that went on from a particular building near their embassy, and that they found rubbish skips with limbs in them in the morning. And they finally managed some sort of, well, not complaint, but some sort of representation. And there came a grudging indication that they put the skip somewhere else. That's the kind of place it was. Ordinary citizens knew that. You also got exaggeration. People told, you know, sort of tall tales because they lived on gossip. And when we look at the situation today, with a BBC reporter and his colleagues in a hotel not knowing what was going on outside, what you have to remember is the television's off at the moment, the local mobile phones are not working, and ordinary people, only men are on the streets on the whole, the families aren't out yet. They are sitting there with no means of information other than their neighbours' gossip and the sound of a lot of gunfire. It could be celebratory. They don't know that. So many people have lived under this difficult and threatening cloud. It is going to take a little while before ordinary citizens can even believe, all of them, what has taken place and be confident to go about their ordinary business. They've never had confidence for years.
Kate Aide, thank you very much.
We're going to show you